Before I begin, I kind of have to tell you a little bit about me and my life for all this to make sense. My name is Zoe, and my life recently fell apart. Um, I am a professional drone pilot. I have my Part 107. I've been competing in various drone sports for many years, and I am pretty much a passionate pilot. I got into drones when I was physically basically handicapped and could not ride my motorcycle. I couldn't go to school. I couldn't do all the things that made me me. And so I found drones through finding a little micro, ended up flying that, and fell in love with it. Since then, I've traveled all over the world, even winning events as recently as last week, and it's kind of something that I love to do. Fly, compete, film. Basically, anything to do with drones is what I'm passionate about. For the building aspects that I love so much, to the actual flying aspects where you get into the drone cockpit and get to be part of the drone and the experience around the world. It's pretty fun. It's something that I enjoy a lot of, and it's something that I've done for years now, semi-professionally, and something I've done with sponsorship support for a while. The way I was able to make it work was I had travel covered mostly by sponsorships. I had most of the products that I used covered, and on top of that, lately, or at least last couple of years, when I got to my more international status as a pilot, had cash sponsorships. And had a cash sponsorship at least really made it work. It allowed me to do it as a full-time job, quote unquote, without really having to rely on other sources of income to make it work. And that was really a big deal for me. That was the dream. I was finally making it happen as a pilot, and I was stoked to be able to do it. And slowly over time, from one sponsor, they stopped covering travel, not just for me, but all the pilots. And then they cut back from paying what they were, they cut it in half. And then from half, they cut it into nothing. And it wasn't just for me, it was for a bunch of other pilots as well. So, yeah, the industry, at least for me, and the little sector that I was in, took a dump. And I couldn't afford to live in Santa Cruz anymore at, so they wanted to raise it to $17.50 a month. And now that I've moved out, it's $19.50 a month for a one-bedroom apartment. Not much bigger than the motorhome that I'm in now, and the story you're about to hear of how I actually ended up in the motorhome. So, leading into that, what happened is I didn't know what to do. The cash sponsorships had dried up. I didn't have money to continue living in Santa Cruz anymore. Like, it was just way too expensive. Housing prices were going up. I was having a hard time finding a job that fit with what I was physically capable of doing. So life really kind of fell apart for me. And I posted a video online that was seen by one of my patrons for several months, Stu from UAV Futures. And that guy was amazing. He gave a shout out for me, and then a lot of you came into my life to help support what I was doing and no longer had the support to do. While I still had to move out and was already under the eviction process, a community member and now a dear friend, Steve, Bubblehead Biker, donated this RV to me. So the catch with the RV was that it was 400 miles away and not in running condition. It had been sitting for about 4 years since it last ran, and from then it had been sitting and run every once in a while for 4 years. So basically the motorhome had just been sitting around collecting dust and not being used. That meant the engine, a few other things had kind of gunked up, and it didn't turn over anymore. It just didn't start. So for me, coming from a motorcycle background, I kind of knew that this RV could potentially work with a little bit of TLC. And I just really needed the help and a little bit of funds to do it. So before Stu even posted his video, the motorhome was already being gifted to me. And on top of that, I was already starting the GoFundMe for Mr. Motorface. And that is really what kind of made it possible. The GoFundMe funds really helped fuel what was possible for Mr. Motorface. Combined with the outreach and support of fans and friends, I was really able to make it work and make it happen. And that's kind of where the story begins. Once the community really came together for the funds and the RV was in Yucca, I basically had to figure out a plan. So figuring out the plan for the RV, this is really the complicated part. So the RV was being donated. It was mine if I could figure out a way to get to it and get it running, and it was basically mine at that point. And that was an amazing gift. But to actually do that and make that happen, kind of difficult. The Patreon funds and the GoFundMe funds weren't going to be available until after I had to be moved out of my apartment. So I had to sell some of my prized possessions, my Mavic, my main 3D flying setup, and one of my main Raggy setups, and essentially use the funds to get the motorhome running and get it up to Santa Cruz so I could actually move all my stuff into it. And I only had like 5 or 6 days to actually do this, like go all the way down 400 miles to Yucca Valley, fix the RV, and then travel up to Santa Cruz to move into it. Like a week's worth of time to make all of that happen. That's insanity. So going with the insanity, I just, as a few fans said, just do it. Just make it work. You'll figure it out on the way. We'll help you figure it out on the way. And you guys really did. A lot of the community really came together, not only to help give me a loan for some of the Patreon funds, but to buy some of my equipment and to really help me raise the funds I needed when I needed them to get the RV running and back up to Santa Cruz. So it's an 800-mile, almost, well, with the way it happened, 1,000-mile journey, and we'll get into that. So this is actually where Sparky comes in. And if you don't know my friend Sparky Josh, he is one of the kindest people in the world and one of the funniest, and really, he's a dear friend of mine. He's a 3D pilot. He flies 3D quads and is essentially one of the few in California that does. And so he's very mechanically inclined. After hearing what was going on, he offered to help out on this adventure. And so Sparky lives in Vesalius, which is 4 hours south of me, and the motorhome is 8 hours south. So Sparky drove 4 hours north to sleep on my floor for a night so we could head out early in the morning to drive 8 hours south. Like, the dude was just down for the adventure. So, and this is where the plan comes in. We have to drive 8 hours south, get the RV running, figure out what's wrong with it, because we didn't even really know what's wrong with the RV, what kept it from running in the first place, and all the other issues with it. So, like, it's a big RV, and with a car, you can think of the electrical issues you'd have with a car. Now think about having a house attached to your car, and all the problems that could come from that, for not have the house running for years. So it was a complicated endeavor, definitely. And to make it happen in time seemed nearly impossible. But with perseverance and with the help of the community, we made it happen. And this is really where the plan comes in. So the plan basically was for Sparky to come up to Santa Cruz, spend the night, go down to Yucca Valley, figure out what's wrong with the RV, fix the RV, get new tires on the RV, drive it back to Santa Cruz with a chase car, and then move into the RV in the matter of 6 days. That is a leap of faith if I've ever taken one. And thank gosh I took it. And that's where the adventure begins. So, with figuring out a basic plan, just an outline of it, I mean, obviously the best laid plans can obviously always go wrong. And they definitely went wrong. So the adventure begins. Sparky, myself, and my mother are off to Yucca Valley, and this is where things start smoothly. Going down to Yucca, we piled into Sparky's truck and essentially just hoofed it 9 hours straight down. We stopped 7 times. Yeah, 7. All 7 of them bathroom breaks. Only 2 of them for gas, actually. So that took a little extra time. It would have been like a 7.5 hour drive turned into a 9 hour drive. Needless to say, when we started the adventure, it was 8 a.m. And when we got to when we got to Steve's, it was about 7 p.m. So yeah, the day had already been done. I had internally been hoping we could poke at the RV, but really there wasn't much we can do, and Kent had already been poking at it for me. So that day kind of, that's really not the excitement I want to show, because it was a really cool moment. Like, the adventure there wasn't all that big of a deal, really. I mean, it took us like 9 hours to actually get to Yucca Valley from Santa Cruz, but the actual experience was really smooth. The big deal was actually seeing the motorhome for the first time. Like, to me, it had been this idea / an offer that had been basically given to me from somebody that I really didn't know. And so it was this crazy, like, leap of faith. And to actually see the RV for the first time, that was absolutely incredible. And I didn't realize that it was 30 foot. I didn't realize it looked as good as it did. And at the time, I thought it was a 2007. Actually, it was in 1999. So, yeah, it came out in the same year, The Matrix. It was a good movie. Good year. I'll take it. Anyways, the RV turned out to be better than I had hoped. I mean, yeah, it had not been running in like 4 years, and yeah, it had been left basically sitting for 8 overall before the engine had stopped running. So it needed some TLC, and I thought, this is the perfect opportunity for me to give it the TLC it needs and to get it back on the road and running again. So that's really where the adventure begins. I mean, it wasn't just getting RV. The RV was getting there, was the simple part. Actually getting it running and back to Santa Cruz, that's the real adventure. I mean, we hung out with Steve, we kind of shot the shit for a while, figured out what was really kind of going on with the RV. We went over the potential issues, what we needed to do, and basically created a plan of attack going forward for it. Having spent an entire day traveling down to Yucca Valley, it was time to call it a day and get some rest and start anew on Saturday. So Saturday arrives, we wake up, or I should say I wake up late. Sparky is already working on the RV, and Kent had already been working on it as well. So, and Steve, the owner of the RV, was also getting up to help them. So I woke up to 3 of these amazing people in the community helping me get the RV working. And the time crunch was a time crunch. We had to replace the master cylinder for the brakes, which took not so much time, but Kent definitely spent some time on that. And then we had to replace the main battery in the motorhome for the starting of the engine, which is very important. So got that replaced. That was pretty simple. Although Steve had already replaced it before we arrived. Like, Steve had been poking at the RV trying to get things going. And then we dropped the fuel line to clear the fuel line of old gas, to clear the fuel tank of old gas. And thankfully, in the process of doing that, we found out that the old gas was definitely old and bad, but it was not corroding. So the fuel line and the fuel tank are in good condition, which also should mean that everything up the line should probably be good too. So putting in fresh gas, getting everything mounted back up, and before I forget, we also had to replace the fuel pump and part of the fuel regulation system. So we had to replace a good chunk of the fuel system, actually. And lo and behold, put some gas in, And it started. So, start it up.
Hit it.
Woo! Yes! The RV actually ran for the first time in years, and it sounded pretty good. Like, it purred better than most vehicles that I've ever owned. So that was the most reassuring sound I've heard in a long time. We left the RV running. It was idling for a couple hours, no issues there. So we thought, you know, hey, great, it's ready to go. The biggest issue now is getting tires on the RV because the old ones were completely rotted out, and you don't want to drive a long trip with a very heavy vehicle on rotted tires. That's just asking for trouble. So part of the money and the funds that I'd raised, spent at least $500 on parts. Now I had to spend another $900 on tires. Now, for a car, getting tires is pretty simple. Like, you just go up to pretty much any tire shop and say, hey, I need tires for this car. And they're like, great, we have tires. Do you need anything special? And if you need something special, they can order it, right? Well, being under the time crunch and essentially getting the RV running on, I believe, Saturday, Sunday was the day that we were going to get the tires changed. Not every place is open on Sunday, and that was a bit of a challenge. On top of that, not every place had the tire size and 6 tires, because it's an RV, we had 2 extra tires on the vehicle. Hey, I love hexacopters, 6 tires, going back to my roots. But yeah, finding 6 tires was a bit of a challenge. So weirdly enough, the only place that had the tires and was open was Walmart. So I'm like, okay, cool, Walmart, we'll do that. They were also the cheapest, which was good to know, and they have a 50,000 mile warranty. And I'm like, great. And so get everything set up, have a whole meeting with Walmart on Sunday morning scheduled, and we roll up the RV, pop it on a port, everything's moving around, this thing's being shaken out for the first time on a drive, and we pull it up to Walmart, bright and early, like, yeah, we can do this, we're ready to go to Santa Cruz, just gotta get these tires on and we're done. Not so fast. So Walmart, once they saw how big the RV was and realized it was like 14,000 pounds, and it would have to basically jack each part of the RV up individually and do multiple sections, they're like, nope, nope, jack's broken, nope. So at this point, I'm freaking out, like, shoot, I don't have a place to get the tires and take them to get changed. It's Sunday, not every place is open. So in a haste, I was able to buy the tires at least from Walmart. They sold them to me. So I had the tires to the motorhome. Great. That's one part of the problem solved. The next part of the issue was actually finding a place open to do it, and that would actually do it. So called a few places, well, Sparky called a few places, and well, I was like freaking out. I was like, oh god, the tires, oh god, I have to move 2 days, oh god, no. Like, I was like freaking out, like pissed at Walmart. I'm like, god damn it, Walmart's screaming over again. And before going to Walmart, I remember this story from Ron White. I hope the editor puts in the story about Walmart and changing tires. I will take the copyright strike. It's just, yeah, I had this fear that Walmart would screw up the tire process anyways. Thankfully, when they saw the motorhome, they're like, nope, you don't want to do it. So, and thankfully, after Sparky called several places, we finally found a place, Discount Tires, and they were stoked to help out. Like, they were, when they found out like the whole story behind the RV, the guy subscribed to me on Twitch Prime, which was mind-blowing. Like, oh cool, he's now giving me a little bit of money every month, and in 2 years I'll make this back. So it worked out good. He did it for 25 bucks a tire. He didn't like gouge me on the prices, and it was a great experience actually. So if you're in Yucca Valley, you need tires done, Discount Tires, baby. And yeah, the owner was really nice. They did it within about a couple hours. So realistically, it only set us back a few hours. And we still had enough time on Sunday to get the RV from Yucca Valley to Santa Cruz, but we'd be arriving late at night. So great, onwards and upwards, right? You know, tires are on, the RV's running good. Let's do this. Well, pull this thing onto the highway, and this is when something haunting happens. We get it up to about 60 miles an hour, and Sparky and I both see the heat gauge on the motorhome, and we're like, shoot, it's redlining. It's literally redlining, and we're going, what's going on? The thing was idling fine, the heat, like, everything was working great. And on top of that, the motorhome had a replaced thermostat 4 years ago and had some work done on the cooling system, so we thought it was fine. And turned out not to be fine. Not at all. And part of it being, sitting for years. And what happened at this point is a trial of epic proportions. What was supposed to be 8 hours of travel, maybe 9 hours of travel in the motorhome, turned into 9 hours of travel back to Sparky's house. So every 30 minutes or less, the motorhome would overheat, and we would have to pull over to the side of the road, let it completely cool down, and then get back on the road and baby it back to like 40 miles an hour and try to keep it at a low RPM so the engine would keep at that low output level and baby this thing back to Santa Cruz. Well, after about 4 or 5 breakdowns and pulling over, and thankfully we had a chase vehicle too, so we could have put the flashers on the chase vehicle. Like, it could have been worse. Could have been way worse if Sparky wasn't there, if I was doing it on my own, if I didn't have my mom in the chase car. Like, things could have been a billion times worse for this whole experience, especially considering the time crunch that I'm in. If the time crunch wasn't there, if I didn't have to move out by that basically 31st, which was just a few days away from this point, I wouldn't be so stressed out. And I was stressed out to the max. I know Sparky saw it, I know my mom saw it, I know everyone I talked to could sense it. The live streams I did, I feel like you could see it in my voice, you could, see it on my face. Like, I was stressed out. And at this point, I was extremely stressed. The motorhome was breaking down constantly. And at this point, thankfully, too, Sparky lives directly between me and where the motorhome was parked. So Sparky was 4 hours south of me and then 4 hours north of the motorhome. So he was a midway point. So I pulled the motorhome into Vesalius. It took us 9 hours to get there. It should have been like a 4-hour trip, but it took us 9 hours with stopping, pulling over, and going slow to get this motorhome to Sparky's place. And Sparky Josh, he is such a kind person. He essentially, he was like, great, we're home. He went to bed, and the next morning, and this is now Monday morning, we start working on the RV again. And this is where the power of community plays in. Like, the whole time, the power of community is in the background here. We're talking to people online, we're getting suggestions for the motorhome, what could be the fixes. Like, it's literally a mind power of pilots coming together to figure out what's wrong with the RV and to fix it. And Sparky Josh is the physical embodiment of the community's hands actually working on this stuff. So it was really cool to see. Like, so he was, in chat with not UFD crew, but the Drone Disorder crew, and they were chatting about what could potentially be the problem with the RV. And everyone basically came to the conclusion that the thermostat was stuck, which possibly could happen with age and just not running it over time. So indeed, we went to the auto parts store, $30, and about 15-20 minutes worth of install later, it was in the RV, and we were ready to get this thing back on the road for attempt number 2 at getting it to Santa Cruz. Anxiety was high, because if it wasn't the thermostat, then it was going to end up being something more expensive and something harder to replace, like the radiator. If there's a block in the radiator where the fluids cannot actually get through it, then it'd be really hard to fix that, and / we just need to replace the radiator. So hoping and crossing our fingers that wasn't the case, because again, the motorhome had been sitting for a while and stuff like that can happen. We got it on the road, went a good 60 miles an hour, and our hearts dropped. The heat gauge slowly raised up to about 80%, and Sparky and I just looked at each other like, God, no, what's happening again? What are we gonna do? And then as soon as it hit about 80%, the gauge literally drops back down to like nothing. And that was the thermostat kicking in, letting the entire system cycle. And that is the biggest relief we had, is the relief of pressure. When you saw that little needle go down, that was the relief needle on my neck, the pressure valve just going. Like, I had never felt more, I guess, relieved. But also still anxious, because as we kept going at the motorhome, and at this point just driving it like it would normally be driven, which is great because it needed to be shaken out, that needle would slowly creep back up, and then it was anxiety inducing because I never paid attention so much to the heat needle on a vehicle so much. And we were driving through a desert. Thankfully it was in the winter, but still a desert. And it still was pretty warm. So yeah, thankfully we started getting back on the road and going to Santa Cruz. Now at this point you're like, great Zoe, you've got the RV going. You have 3 days to move into the RV and out of your apartment. Everything's going great. What else could go wrong? Have you tried to park a 30-foot RV before? Probably not. It's big. There's a reason Mr. Steele's van is small. But you know what, Mr. Steele? You're small too. You can fit in the van. I'm a big person. I'm 6 foot. I can't fit in a van. I thought about van living before, and that would just not work. But at the same time, a 30-foot RV going through a city? This thing is so big. I had to have Sparky drive it because I have anxiety driving it. I have anxiety driving a car. That's why I liked motorcycles, because I was on a motorcycle. I couldn't do any damage with that. If I did any damage, it would be to me, which would be my stupid fault. But this is a 14,000-pound vehicle. It's so big. Like, any bigger than this, and it'd be classified as a Class A, which is a whole nother realm of licensing. So, the anxiety of driving something this big around. Like, you think, great, Zoe, everything's worked out. No, where the hell am I going to park this? Now, this is where my mom's experience comes in. She's been working, and she'd worked in the hotel industry for quite a while, and she knew some of the hotels around town. Now, Santa Cruz being Santa Cruz, there's hotels everywhere. And thankfully down the street there's one that I was able to actually pay them $50 for 3 nights to park the RV there while I moved everything into it. And without that, I would have been screwed. If I could not work a deal with one of the local hotels or one of the locals to actually make that happen, it would have made everything not work. I would have had to park the RV far away and then do multiple loads. It just wouldn't work. Now that I had the RV parked down the street and in a safe spot at a hotel parking lot under surveillance, yay! So now was the journey of me dismantling my entire workshop. And this is kind of where one of my last videos comes in. If you haven't watched it yet, go watch my workshop video, which details pretty much everything in my workshop. I just walk through and give you a tour. There's a lot of history that I had in that place, and it's still not totally, like, I still mentally feel like I can go back there, but I know I can't, and that sucks. But I have a new canvas now. I have a motorhome that I can help build into my new workshop. A mobile workshop, a better workshop. One that allows me to do more with my life, allows me to do more with the projects that I want to work on. And that's going to be something that I'm pretty excited about. I mean, yeah, it's been a super big challenge over the last few weeks to get the motorhome, get moved into it, and get everything figured out. But since then, like, I've gotten a workbench installed into the motorhome, like 6 feet of workbench. That's bigger than most people have. So, like, I'm blessed to have the workbench that I do. I have my edit bay, the computer that I'm normally using, working again in the same kind of format and way that I would use it back at my old workshop. Like, the things that allowed me to do what I loved, the tools, the workbench, the editing bay, now that I have internet, those are the things that made my life my life. And the house, the living where I was living in the apartment, that felt more like a chain. I mean, that was literally a chain that kept me there. Now with this, I can take my workshop anywhere I want. I can go where I want to go. I can forge my own path forward. And because of the patron support, because of your support, I now have the ability to do that. I have the ability to do things that I've always wanted to do, to follow my dreams, which is fucking amazing. Like, I can't wait to start doing some of the projects that I've been working on forever. Just haven't had the resources to work on, just haven't had the time to do it. And now I have the resources, I have the time, I have the ability. Oh, look at a lot of